Hi guys, welcome back to In Case of Econ Struggles. Welcome to another AP Micro Struggle. Today we're talking about topic 3.1, which is about the production function. Here's what you need to know about the production function. You need to know that the production function tells you how you turn inputs into outputs. We're going to talk about diminishing marginal product and average product. And not in this video, but in the next video, we'll start talking about short-run cost functions. So timestamps are below if you would like to jump around, but let's get right into it. In order to talk about the production function, we're once again going to talk about Bill, but this time we're going to make Bill a farmer. Remember that the production function tells you how you turn inputs into outputs. So we're going to have Bill. He's also a worker. He's what we call labor, which we represent with L. He's got a field, and maybe he's got a tractor. Maybe he's got some farm equipment. We're going to call that capital. Now, most of the time when we use capital in production functions, we're going to use a K. So I'm going to spell capital this way just to help you remember that capital or land or equipment is K for capital. And the production function, we're going to make corn, frequently represented by a Y in production functions. Now I talked about the fact that in the next video we're going to talk about short run cost functions, but for this video I'm going to talk briefly about the difference between the short run and the long run. So the short run is sort of like tomorrow or this week or even like next week. Whereas the long run is like next year or 2 years or 5 years from now. The big difference between the short and the long run is that in the long run, Bill can change how much capital he has. So for example, maybe he can buy another field, maybe he can build a barn, maybe he can buy a tractor. But this week or next week or this month, he's not able to do that. The only thing that Bill can change in the short run is labor. So he can work harder, he can work not as hard. Maybe Bill hires Dave or Deb or one of his other friends to come help him work the field, so he can change labor in the short run, but he can't change capital in the short run. Capital is fixed. Generally, we use K upper bar to denote the fact that capital is fixed in the short run, but in the long run, Bill can change both labor and capital. With that out of the way, let's just talk about a pretty simple production function that you might see. Once again, the picture in our head is Bill the laborer plus field capital is going to be turned into corn. So maybe the amount of corn that Bill can make is just the square root of how many hours Bill works in the field in, say, like a given week or something. So now what we're going to talk about with diminishing marginal product, remember the word marginal means how much extra something we can produce with an extra something else. So marginal product is how much extra corn we can make if Bill spends 1 more hour per week in the field. We can also think about it as how much extra corn Bill can produce if he has one other person helping him in the field. This is going to look very similar to diminishing marginal utility, but now it's diminishing marginal product because again, we're thinking about how much extra corn Bill can make if Bill hires 1 more extra person to help him in the field. So here in this table on the left, here are the number of people helping Bill. Here's how many, like tons of corn they can produce. And this is the extra tonnage of corn they can produce with that extra person. So notice that when Bill is just working by himself, he can make 2 tons of corn. When he hires someone else, now they can make 6 tons, 9 tons, 11 tons, and 12 tons. So the difference, that rate of change is going down. That's what we call diminishing marginal product. So as you can see, as we add more and more people, we can make less and less extra corn, even though the total amount of corn is going up. That's what we call the diminishing marginal product of labor in this case, because we're specifically asking how much extra corn can we make with 1 extra worker, changing labor. If we were changing like the number of fields or the number of tractors, that would be the marginal product of capital, which would have a very similar shape if we talked about diminishing marginal product of capital. Most of the time, you're going to have diminishing marginal product. You don't have to have diminishing marginal product. If you have constant marginal product, it's just a straight line. You can make the same extra amount of corn when you add another worker for each time you add another worker. Maybe you have increasing marginal product. This is super rare, but this would be that as you add more and more workers, you can just produce even more and even more corn. This would be like if I had infinite workers, I could produce infinite corn. Constant marginal product of labor is also saying if I had infinite number of workers, I could produce infinite amount of corn. And diminishing marginal product is like, well, if I had infinite number of workers, I probably could not really produce infinite amount of corn. So that's sort of the main difference between diminishing and constant / increasing. Most of the time in your class, you're going to see diminishing marginal product of labor. We can also talk about average product. Average product is simply you just take how much corn you can produce, you divide that by how many people are working in the field, and you get an average product of labor. Notice that in this case, it's not going to have a particular shape. It's also not going to be constant over all your amounts of workers. So notice that it's going up for a little bit, it stays the same, and then it starts going down. It's a pretty typical shape for average product of labor, and we're going to talk about this more when we talk about like average cost in the next video. But hopefully this gives you a better understanding of the production function and diminishing marginal product. If this was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for another case of econ struggles.